got the man with the light.
Yeah.
Man with the plan. You have enough room? Alright, so for everyone, how we've been doing this is I say go live and everyone clicks that button. We wait about 30 seconds and then I just give a nod and you guys go for it, okay? We're just gonna wait one more minute.
Oh, it's Druthers. Fantastic. Up to this.
Yes, they're all gonna go sync and go live at the same time. I'm gonna command. Okay, just hold on.
Alright, it looks like everyone's close to ready. Correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alright, we're going live in 3, 2, 1. Thanks for joining us. We're just waiting for the rooms to fill. All right, ready when you are.
Good afternoon and welcome to our first daily press briefing of Freedom Convoy 2022. Let me first start with a general statement before we move into the actual meat of today's presentation. As has been said about us from day one of the protest, we recognize and respect the rule of law. Many people say we don't. That is false. Despite our disagreement with the need for an injunction, which was just put in place against us in the courts, we will respect the court's decisions and we will abide by the terms of the 10-day injunction. We do, however, notice that the judge in the case repeatedly pointed out that Canadians have the right to freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, free speech, and in so doing referred directly to the Freedom Convoy and its presence in Ottawa. From our point of view, that was a huge victory. The fact that we're giving up the horns for every now and again is just a tactical bit of interest. Now, the main topic for today, the reason we're actually here, is we are gathered to address the false accusations put against us of terrorism and insurrection. This, of course, has been coming from a number of people, such as Ottawa City Councillor Diana Dean, Mayor Watson of Ottawa, and several others. To do this, myself and former RCMP Corporal Danny Bulford will explain our backgrounds in counterterrorism and insurrectionary events. Danny will introduce himself in the background, then I will introduce my background, and following that, we will directly address the accusations. Danny, over to you.
Thank you for coming. My name is Danny Bulford. I joined the RCMP in August of 2006. I come from a family of RCMP officers. My dad was a member of the Mounties for approximately 38 years. My older brother Sean was a member of the RCMP. He's since recently just left and moved to another country. And my older brother Ryan is still currently an active member of the RCMP out in British Columbia. I recently just left the RCMP December 15th over the mandates. Prior to that, I was initially posted to the Yukon Territory where I worked in 2 detachments, predominantly general duty policing in the detachment of Whitehorse City and Mayo, Yukon. After almost just shy of 7 years of service in N Division, Yukon Territory.
Let's just hold for a second.
Do you want me to do this?
Sorry, can you
My
get
whole
that line,
spiel?
please?
Just keep going.
Or just my bad?
Yeah, continue.
Just keep going.
All right, I served just under 7 years in M Division Yukon Territory before taking a transfer here to Ottawa to be on the full-time emergency response team, which is the RCMP's version of a tactical unit. So I was initially trained as an emergency response team member while I was still posted in the Yukon Territory back in the spring of 2009. That was a part-time team that I was a part of up in Whitehorse. There was only a select few places in Canada where I could go do that as my full-time job. Ottawa was one of them, so I transferred here in 2013 for that purpose. I was trained as a sniper for the emergency response team in the fall of 2011, and that was prior to moving to Ottawa. And then while I was in Ottawa, I had the opportunity to train in multiple different specialties, but my predominant role was as a sniper observer. Some of the other specialties include marine operations, chemical munitions instructor. I was a basic firearms instructor for the RCMP. A lot of our focus was on protective operations, like supporting protection of the Prime Minister and other VIPs. And then we spent a great deal of time refining our abilities as regards to hostage rescue, similar to counterterrorism operations, and covert surveillance type operations as well. When it comes to terrorism, I've been a part of counterterrorism operations in a tactical context a number of times. I actually know and have had a good working relationship with the officer in charge of the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team here in Ottawa, because over the last 3 to 4 years of my career, I had been leading an initiative that I had proposed to my divisional management in attempts to convince them and other units within the RCMP that my former units would be best utilized as a designated national hostage rescue counterterrorism team, similar to what the FBI hostage rescue team is down in the United States. To the point where I had the opportunity to train with multiple agencies that would have similar capabilities, including the FBI hostage rescue team in Quantico, Virginia. I've had the opportunity to train in multiple locations all over the world, predominantly North America. Or in a training context in almost every single province and territory of this country. I've been deployed internationally in a protective operations context, supporting the protection of our Prime Minister in countries that would be considered more high risk. When it comes to the rhetoric about terrorism, I feel like I have some qualification to unequivocally state that this is not it. When I look at the Freedom Convoy, my observations are nothing but peaceful Canadians who are just taking a stand because their fundamental rights and freedoms have been oppressed for far too long. When I go downtown to where the majority of the trucks and the majority of the supporters are, pedestrian supporters, all I see is people happy, smiling, hugging each other, complete strangers of every background, embracing each other and dancing in the streets because they know that we're crumbling the narrative and that we are all united like never before in order to get our freedom back. You know, I've seen people shoveling snow off the streets and around the War Memorial and the Terry Fox statue. I've seen people providing security for those two locations. They're feeding the homeless. This is certainly, the idea that this could be labeled terrorism is absolutely ridiculous just because certain members of the council don't like the horn honking. We have been completely peaceful and cooperative with the police this entire time. We have gone out of our way to make the police aware of any possible public safety concern, because our main concern, and I know that the police liaisons that I've spoken to, their main concern is individual lone wolf actors or counter-protest groups that will try and incite some kind of aggression between themselves and people from the freedom movement in order to discredit the Freedom Convoy movement. And they all know it. Every police officer I've spoken to has been great to deal with. We haven't had the same level of cooperation in return that we would hope for, especially for basic needs such as sanitation. Obviously the fuel is an issue that people are aware of, but we have gone out of our way to ensure public and police safety this entire time. And I mean, that's paramount to us and to me personally. I have just a couple more points. The only arrests that I'm aware of that are directly associated with the convoy were people who were arrested for carrying fuel or having access to fuel cans to help refuel trucks for aiding and abetting a mischief. The two gentlemen, well, one gentleman that I spoke to in person and the other gentleman that was a witness and arrested as well, were both released without charge. They weren't even interviewed. And to me, that is a clear indicator that the harsh speech about terrorism and holding the city hostage is just a scare tactic. It's just rhetoric that is meant to induce fear and prevent people from supporting the movement. You know, to arrest someone for aiding and abetting mischief, I've never even heard of that in my career before, and I've arrested many people for mischief in my general duty career. That's a pretty weak move on the behalf of the police services, in my opinion. And what I'm starting to see and hear is that police and other first responders, they are waking up to the misleading narrative. And we've all heard the rumors about, you know, a large percentage of police officers that are unwilling to continue enforcing these this overreach. I have it on what I consider to be credible sources that there is a significant number of police officers that are refusing to come to work. Definitely that they are very unimpressed with the actions that were taken recently, and that their morale is really starting to take a hit, and many of them are becoming supportive of our cause. I guess my message to them would be that we still believe in you. We still believe that you are the kind of people that will stand up for us and do the right thing if you are asked or ordered to do something that you believe to be unlawful and unconstitutional. I've spoken before in previous interviews about my line in the sand and when it was crossed and when I decided to take a stand and speak out. I believe that that line is being crossed more and more with our police and first responders. And I just want to say that all you have to do is say no. You don't have to publicly speak out and jeopardize your career. Just say no. I will not do that. I don't believe that that's a lawful order. That's all you have to do. And if enough of us stand up with each other and they don't have their muscle or their enforcement arm, then this can all end and we can all get on with life. And further to that, I would just like to say this. My own experience within the RCMP, and I'm sure, and I've had this conversation with many other members of different police services, is the top doesn't care about the front line. Well, I do. I care about all of you. That's why I am trying to work so hard to make sure that everyone stays safe. You will never, ever be expendable to me and the people I'm working with. So We've all been thrown under the bus, or we know of stories about getting thrown under the bus by senior management whenever it's to please a special interest group or their political masters. I will never do that to you, ever. I will stand with you. Please stand with me. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. My name's Tom Quiggin. My current role with the Convoy is protective intelligence, as well as daily intelligence reporting. By protective intelligence, we mean what the military would call force protection, looking after the people around you. So our primary goal is to provide protective intelligence for the truckers and their families. The secondary goal is to expand that out and provide protective intelligence for police, paramedics, firefighters, and those kinds of folks working with us. And then the third ring out is to provide protective intelligence to the citizens of Ottawa and anyone else who happens to be visiting here. By way of background, in my earlier days, I was an airborne electronic sensor operator in seeking helicopters. We did open ocean search and rescue and anti-submarine warfare, primarily in the North Atlantic. Following that, I was an intelligence officer in the military. I spent time on the ground in all those wonderfully exciting places like Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia, where they were having an actual insurrectionary war. Somewhere along the line in all of that, I was also in northern Albania, Belarus, Russia, eastern Ukraine, Poland, the United Kingdom, Florida, Puerto Rico, a whole bunch of other places. Following military service, I went directly to work for the Privy Council Office, something called the Intelligence Assessment Secretariat. That is the intelligence body in Canada that does intelligence assessment directly for Cabinet and the Prime Minister. I also assisted the Citizenship and Immigration Department in setting up their intelligence section, which dealt with war crimes, terrorism, etc. Following that, I worked for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, specifically INSET, the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team. I did that for almost 6 years, and in that role I was doing contract intelligence work primarily aimed at counterterrorism, also doing intelligence work for G7, G8, G20, the President, Bush visit, those sorts of things. While working for the RCMP, I testified in the criminal court, specifically Ontario Superior Court, as a court expert in Canada's first post-9/11 terrorism case. In 2006-2007, I worked at Nanyang Tech University in Singapore on an intelligence research project focused on horizon scanning and futures intelligence. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I managed to get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in political science. I might also add I'm a court-qualified expert on terrorism in both the Ontario Superior Court and the Federal Court of Canada, and I have testified both for prosecution and defense in a variety of different cases. The Federal Court of Canada, just by way of note, also recognized my expertise in the reliability of intelligence as evidence in courts. This is the similar subject I taught to judges and special advocate lawyers at the Department of Justice. In other words, when they're dealing with intelligence material, how do they accept that as evidence in court, given that intelligence is somewhat different from standard evidence? I've also published a number of books, including one on national security intelligence requirements, and I have multiple publications in multiple countries. I've spoken at conferences in Canada, the United Kingdom, USA, Singapore, Netherlands, Thailand, and others. Now, on to my specific point for today. Councillor Diane Deans of the Ottawa City Council is a lifelong political person with no actual real-world experience. She's been on city council for years in a variety of positions. Mayor Watson has much the same trajectory. He started out in university as a political activist in a party at university years, and he spent most of his life as either a councillor, an MLA, or the mayor of Ottawa. Again, never had an actual kinetic job where he had to do something, get something done, meet a paycheck, meet an objective, that sort of thing. Both of these individuals, I would assess, are uniquely unqualified to make accusations about me and the people around me related to terrorism or insurrection. They spend their lives in the Ottawa bubble, and I would suggest the city of Ottawa is entirely removed from reality. And anybody that's ever worked here knows that there's Parliament Hill, 10 kilometers this way, 10 kilometers that way. That's Canada, these folks. That's all they know about. So, let me just say that I've also been to a war on the ground, carrying a gun, doing intelligence work and force protection in a war that was an actual insurrection. There were several insurrections in the former Yugoslavia, which turned into one bloody long mess for about 4 years, in which tens of thousands of people got killed. So I know what an insurrection looks like. This is not an insurrection. Between the two of us and many other team members, we're keenly aware of those who advocate political violence, that is to say terrorism and insurrection. We believe that the statements coming from Councillor Diana Dean, Mayor Watson, and a multiplicity of others are part of a larger information operation designed to control the minds of Canadians. The campaign is also designed to provoke civil disobedience and violence. The only people advocating violence so far in this whole mess have been the Prime Minister, the Mayor, the leader of the NDP party, people like Councillor Dean, and a few others. The only people talking about violence, terrorism, insurrection, etc. are folks like them and Chief Stoley. Over here on our side, we are not advocating anything like that. And for Danny and I, if we saw anything resembling terrorism or insurrection, we'd be the first ones on the phone to talk about it. Now, it's also worth remembering, if you kind of go back into Google or something like that, when this pandemic first started, the Canadian Forces was caught, much to my shame, doing information operations against Canadians, which was brought to a halt fairly quickly. But it shows you the government of Canada is perfectly willing to use its institutions, and including some of its more revered institutions, to do operations against Canadian citizens, which as a former soldier and as an intelligence officer, frankly, I find revolting. To be clear, if myself, Danny, or anyone else in the convoy, and we have a number of other folks who are ex-military, ex-firefighters, paramedics, all those kinds of folks, if we have any information on political violence, the first phone call goes into the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team at the RCMP. The second phone call goes to the intelligence section of the Ottawa Police. So we would offer a challenge to Councillor Dean, to Mayor Watson, to Prime Minister Trudeau, anyone else. If you want to come down and talk about terrorism, if you think you actually have evidence, if you think there is something going on which will create terrorism, please come down and see us. We need to hear your information. We would enjoy talking with you, and we'll have a one-on-one conversation with you. One other thing drives me a little bit nuts, and this is my final comment. A number of folks, including the Prime Minister, went on to things, and I forget what we all are, but apparently we're racists, we're extremists, we're transphobic, we're homophobic, we're misogynistic, something else, and we're Islamophobic.
Science deniers.
We're science deniers too, which is actually quite the opposite. The science is on the side of the truckers, and we got some of the best medical minds in the world here helping us. We are pro-science, we are pro-choice on vaccines. If you want to get a vaccine, good. No one here is going to tell you no. So, in closing, I would like to address Prime Minister Trudeau and others who accuse us of Islamophobia. Me, as an individual, testified in court on multiple occasions in defense of Muslims who were doing what we call DWI, driving while Islamic. A couple of these guys were chucked in jail, one of them for more than 6 years, on false, trumped up charges of being sleeper cell jihadist and all this other crap, excuse my French. I went into the court using my court expertise, my badge as a court expert, testified in federal court on multiple occasions, and pointed out to the court specifically saying, look, this guy, yeah, he's a Muslim guy, yeah, he might be a little, doing some silly stuff, but he's not a terrorist, he's not a jihadist, he's not a sleeper cell, and we won the case. Interestingly enough, I don't remember the media meeting me outside of the courtroom after that one, because it wasn't too good. Anyway, that kind of concludes, well, it might be a couple of rants actually, but that concludes our statement, and at this point, questions, comments, anything at all?
People on the live are just asking for your name again.
Tom Quiggin, Quiggin, at TOMTSEC, at Tom Tsec.
Furthermore, on the Islamophobia front, when we were being labeled all of these terrible ending names, we had a Muslim woman reach out to us specifically to counter the narrative because she knows it's completely false. And so what we did is we coordinated facilitating her and her son and some others to come up to the main stage where the events have been taking place, and they led the crowd in a Friday prayer. And I believe that may be something that we're doing more of in the future just to show that we are inclusive of everyone.
Just for fun, follow my train of thought here for a second. The very first event, official event, of this convoy was the prayer service a week ago. A Iraqi-born Arab Shia Muslim, which is a bit of a rare event, directed Canadians and said they should attend the prayer service, which was opened by two clan mothers, one Dene clan, one Cree. The prayer service itself was run by a black, evangelical, French-speaking pastor from Montreal and a white Mennonite pastor from Ontario. All of this is being done in support of Freedom Convoy 2022, and if you go back and look at the GoFundMe page, or what's left of it, you'll see that the two people that were kind of behind that initial GoFundMe thing were a Jewish truck driver and a Métis woman. So I would like to point out to Justin Trudeau, if you're so up on all your diversity, inclusion, and all that kind of stuff, we got you beat hand down, brother. The other thing I would like to say is Justin Trudeau has labeled us as like the fringe minority. So here's a little political science lesson to Justin Trudeau, who was speaking again in the House last night about Canadians gave him a mandate to get everybody vaccinated. Personally, I never saw the vaccine thing on the mandate, but let's forget that. Let's look at the actual math behind what goes on in this kind of thing. Here in Canada, we have Elections Canada. They have a voters list. So who can vote in Canada? Well, 100% of the people who are on the voters list can vote in Canada. During the last election, Justin Trudeau got 20% of all those people who were on the voters list. The other 80% of Canadians either didn't vote for the Liberal Party or they voted or they didn't vote at all. So Justin Trudeau got about 20% of all registered voters. So when he says he has a mandate to do X, Y, and Z and that we're the fringe minority, my point to him would be his government actually represents 20% of all registered voters in Canada. I think it's what, 21.3 or something. Whereas the other 80% of people in Canada didn't vote for this guy.
Could you comment on the first Liberal Party member of Parliament now dissenting with the Prime Minister as of today, basically saying that you cannot mix medical science and politics?
I won't get into the Liberal Party thing and whatever, obviously that's an internal matter to them. We have been told by a number of folks that there's a lot of discontent in Parliament. Not just amongst Conservatives, but amongst the NDPers and the Liberals as well. I think what you're seeing there is the first crack in the dam. We have a whole bunch of MPs who privately reached out to us, which is great. It would be nice if they publicly reach out to us. But we do think that like the police forces, like the intelligence services, and like the citizenry, there are a lot of folks who are just upset with the way the government's being run right now. And I think what this convoy has done is it has shone a light on the discontent, it's shone a light on the lack of freedom, it's shone a light on how our government is slowly moving everything to the center, where we have a near sort of totalitarian system in Canada now where everything runs through PMO or not at all. So I think my opinion is, and let me just say that's an opinion and not an expert opinion, is that that's the first crack in the Liberal dam.
There's a really intelligent Canadian former professor who's famous for saying that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. And I think perhaps that may be what we are seeing right now, as people are stepping up to take stepping up to take the opportunity where responsibility has been abdicated by the Prime Minister.
Speaking of abdicating responsibility, to be clear, I am personally horrified by comments from Mayor Watson and his council accusing us of being insurrectionists, terrorists, and whatever else. However, I'm not completely without empathy in the sense that I believe that Mayor Watson was thrown under the bus by Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau basically absconded and disappeared and left Mayor Watson standing there. Mm-hmm. The City of Ottawa police are great at demonstrations. They're great at, basic on-the-ground policing. But this movement is unique. We've never had a cross-Canada movement with this much behind it. And one of the problems they've got is it's a totally peaceful movement, which confuses them. If this was an actual insurrection with people actually committing violence, they'd had this whole thing cleaned up in like 3 days. But I do feel I don't want to say I feel sorry for Mayor Watson, because I think to a certain degree he's author of his own problems. But I do think he was thrown under the bus by the Prime Minister, and with Mayor Watson having the day before said, you know, this thing needs to be shifted over to Justin Trudeau, I think that's Mayor Watson stating the obvious. The City of Ottawa has no capability, no leverage, no power, no authority to fix this situation, and the fix to that situation lies across over there in Parliament.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one, an interesting one that came up here. So this is obviously from somebody who is against the idea of the Freedom Convoy, and it's, has this been allowed to go on so long?
Well, we refer you back to the judge's decision in the injunction, where the judge said Canadians have a right to mobility, assembly, freedom of speech, and peaceful protest. So the reality is it can carry on for an extended period of time because it's constitutionally enshrined and guaranteed by the Charter of Rights. And just, I'm not a lawyer, but my political science side of me tells me this, that says, look, there's probably some municipal bylaw somewhere that says I'm not allowed to park sideways in the street, and that's fine. But when it comes to a competition or a collision between the various layers of law, the Constitution and the Charter are supreme, and if there is a conflict between the two, this one rules. So the ability to assemble peacefully, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement, all of those, I'll use the term, outrank some municipal bylaw that says, you know, you can't drive a truck down a street sideways or something like that.
Any other questions?
I've got a question. Birch City News. Maybe could you talk a little bit about the visual balance of power that we see, like in the fluctuation of the police officers versus the population of the crowd? Is that part of the tactical plan?
Are you referring to like the number of police services that are here and the different types of units?
Let's say what we've observed since we've been here is when there's more people, there's a much larger visual presence of police officers.
Yeah,
So can you talk about the optics of that? Is that designed to intimidate, or what is the design behind that, or the intent behind that?
I don't have the sense that it's designed to intimidate. I mean, that might be a byproduct, but anytime we have a great, like a very large event in the downtown Ottawa area, Canada Day or any event similar, we always have to bring in resources from all over the province, sometimes even from other parts of Canada, in order to supplement the resources that are required, because the City of Ottawa just doesn't have the manpower to be able to deal with something of this scale. And so it's totally expected from my point of view to see what we've been seeing, like even with the barricading of roads, ever since, you know, that is, yes, it serves the purpose of preventing free access to all the roadways by some of the trucks, but it's also designed for public safety, especially when we have the giant crowds of pedestrians in the downtown core. So all of the different police services, all of the different units, like from the patrol officer to the public order unit to the tactical unit to the snipers on rooftops, I've seen that countless times for large scale events. When in regards to the fluctuation, like more crowd, more police, I think that's just common sense. You need more police to deal with a larger size crowd, especially if there is a police emergency. They're going to need those resources to evacuate people away from the danger and to intervene and deal with the threat.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question? Speaking of the human resources, we know that the local police here are working extremely long hours. So if you were to look at the time horizon, would they actually be burning out their officers or running out of human resources for this event?
Well, we've seen a lot of messaging in media and social media regarding like an influx of officers being sworn in and potentially being brought into Ottawa. There are potentially a number of reasons why that may be, but I get one of the simplest solutions, or one of the simplest reasons in my mind, is that they just need to rotate people out. right? People have been working all day, every day for long hours, and it's not sustainable long term, right? So that logistically, it just makes sense to have people rotating in from other parts of the country. Yeah.
One final comment maybe. Across the street from us is Parliament. The word Parliament comes from parler, the Old Norman French, and it means to speak. A parliament, especially ours, a Westminster-style parliament, is a place where we send representatives of the people to go and discuss the problems and the issues of the country, try and figure out how to run things. It is also the place where the citizens go to meet their representatives to speak with them. So I've testified in the Senate a couple of times. I've testified to House committees in the House of Commons. I've testified at the Air India Royal Commission of Inquiry on behalf of the Air India families. And that is a part of the citizens going to the government to aid in the representation, which is this wild thing called democracy. I think what we need right now is for our democracy to function, and that is to say a whole bunch of citizens have gathered on the front lawn of Parliament here, and we're demanding a hearing, and we're not even getting invited to a House committee or a Senate committee or anything. So for those folks who say, why don't you guys leave, or how long are you staying here, the answer is, this is a simple fix. It's a simple fix to a complex problem. It's a political problem, it needs a political solution, and the folks that hold that are the elected members of our Parliament. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
We'll close there.
Over now.
Good job, guys.
That was awesome.